All right, let's do the letters from August 1st, 1775. Here's Independence Hall on this beautiful morning. Okay, today we're going to look at the letters for August 1st, 1775. There are 10 documents here. It looks like let's just go through them. I haven't looked at them yet myself, so we will scan through them quickly. Looks like we have um, a few letters, two letters to John Adams or from John Adams. This one looks interesting. August 1775. Might be just a summary. We have a bill. We have a letter to Ben Franklin. Promissory note to Peter Reeve from members of the Pennsylvania Committee of Safety. 1st of August. Okay. York County Committee to the Pennsylvania Delegates in Congress. York County. I want to say that's in Pennsylvania, right? That's York County, Pennsylvania. I guess we'll see. General orders, as usual. Richard Henry Lee, and then Massachusetts Committee of Supplies to George Washington. All right, so let's click. We'll click into the general orders first, and we'll get an update on how the war is going with the Massachusetts Committee of Supplies, and then we'll see how things are looking from there. Okay? So, general orders. Oh gosh, this one looks long. All right, let's give it a read. Headquarters Cambridge, countersign Fairfield, parole Gibraltar. Gibraltar. Okay, interesting. I assume not Gibraltar in France or wherever Gibraltar is. France, Spain. Um, okay, general orders, August 1st, 1775. The general thanks Major Tupper and the officers and soldiers under his command for their gallant and soldier-like behavior in possessing themselves in the enemy's post at the lighthouse, and for the number of prisoners they took there, and doubts not, but the Continental Army will be as famous for their mercy as for their valor. 2 subs, 2 sergeants, 1 drum, and 30 rank and file to parade at headquarters at noon to escort the prisoners to Worcester, not Worcester or Worcester, Worcester. The commanding officer will receive his orders from the adjutant general. From the satisfaction of all concerned, the general directs the following resolution of the legislature to this colony to be inserted in general orders. Quote, in the House of Representatives, Watertown, 29th of July, 1775. Okay. Whereas sundry complaints have been made by some of the soldiers raised by this colony that they have not received the allowance pay of 40 shillings agreeable to the resolution of Provincial Congress, therefore resolved that a committee be appointed forthwith to apply to the colonels and several regiments raised by the colony and to the muster masters and paymasters in the camp at Cambridge and Roxbury, and obtain of them a complete list of the non-commissioned officers and soldiers in their respective regiments, distinguishing those that have been mustered and paid from those that have not, that such methods may be pursued as shall remove all just ground of complaint. Read and ordered that Colonel Cushing and Mr. Webster, with such as the honorable board shall join, to be a committee for the purpose above mentioned. Sent up for a concurrence, James Warren, Speaker. In council, read and concurred, and Colonel Lincoln is joined. ALBTP Morton, Secretary. I don't know what ALBTP means. Albeit something. Albrecht, someone's name. I'm not sure. But Morton, Secretary. Maybe John Morton? No. One of the other Mortons, maybe. Anyway. The officers commanding Massachusetts regiments will pay all due attention to the foregoing resolution. 1 man a company to be appointed a camp color man from every company and every regiment in the army, whose particular duty it must be to attend the quartermaster and quartermaster sergeant to sweep the streets of their respective encampments, to fill up the old necessary houses and dig new ones, to bury all offal, filth, and nastiness that may poison or infect the health of the troops, and the quartermasters are to be answerable to their commanding officers for the strict observance of this order, and by persevering in the constant and unremitted execution thereof, remove that odious reputation which, with but too much reason, has stigmatized the character of American troops. The colonels and commanding officers of regiments are to be answerable to the general for all due diligence, for all due obedience to this order. The general, finding it is not uncustomary for officers to take the liberty of absenting themselves from camp without leave and going home, for the future, any officer found guilty of so glaring an offense against all order and discipline, and setting so bad an example to the non-commissioned officers and soldiers under their command, such officer or officers so offending may depend upon being punished with utmost severity, lest the late successes against the enemy should occasion any relaxation in the alertness of the troops. The general recommends it in the strongest manner to all the officers and soldiers of the Continental Army to be the more vigilant in their duty and watchful of the enemy, as they certainly will take every advantage of any suppiness on our part. Okay, great. Here are some footnotes. You can pause the video and read them if you want. There are too many. We're going to move on. So those were general orders for this day. Now let's what shall we do next? Let's just quickly see what the Massachusetts Committee of Supplies said. If they said anything worth our review here. Chamber of Supplies. May it please your excellency, Mr. Cheever has applied this afternoon for 200,000 small arm cartridges in consequence of an application from the Adjutant General to answer the demand of Major General Lee. Mr. Cheever is able to furnish about 36,000, it being the whole quantity now made, and there remains but 36 barrels in store for the quantity collected from the towns in this colony and received from the others this side of Maryland. There are also about 2 tons of lead and not any flints in store, of which we think it necessary to give immediate information. We are in daily expectation of some powder from the West Indies, but cannot say what success our plans will meet with. Indeed, we have exerted ourselves to obtain it several ways, which may be communicated at a more convenient opportunity. With respect to leads and flints, Colonel Porter... Flints... Yeah, I think that's Colonel. C-O-L-O, period. Porter was dispatched 16 days since for New York for 200s, I believe, flints and 10 tons lead, but we have heard nothing from him since. We are ready to exert to the utmost to serve the cause, provided the Commissary General desires it for the present. The powder shall be sent immediately if ordered, or be made into cartridges as soon as may be. We are, sir, respectfully your most obedient servant, Elbridge Gary. Something order. Right. Good old Elbridge Gary. He's a delegate to the Continental Congress, I believe. Okay, great. So they're getting some supplies. Richard Henry Lee to George Washington. Let's skim this real quick. Dear sir, after the fatigue of many days, and of this in particular, I should not sit down at 11 o'clock at night to write to a gentleman of whose goodness of heart I have less doubt than I have of yours. But well knowing that you will pardon what flows from good intentions, I venture to say that my hopes are you will find from what the Congress has already done, and from what I hope they will do tomorrow, that it has been a capital object with us to make your arduous business as easy as the nature as easy as for you, I believe, as easy to you as the nature of things will admit. The business immediately being before us being furnished, the approaching sickly season here, and the great importance of our presence in the Verga Convention have determined a recess of a month. It standing now that the Congress shall meet here again on the 5th of September. Okay, so now he goes into the problem of obtaining powder, 6 or 8 tons. We understand the batteries are constructed. A signal stroke to secure the fleet. So compel a surrender at discretion. Okay, but I think that I think we have taken the most effectual measures of friendship of the Indians all along our extensive frontiers, and by what we learn of the spirit of convention now sitting in Richmond, a spirit prevails. They are very sufficient to secure us on that quarter. Okay. The London ships having been detained long beyond the time they were expected. Prodigious fall of stocks, I heartily... Okay. Alright, so we're going to leave it there. Yeah, and here are some footnotes you can read if you wish. But this is just a general update. Let's see. Let's choose one more because there are a lot of very interesting documents here, but let's just click through them. We'll click through them quickly just to get a sense. Let's start at the top. August 1775 from the Adams Papers. This is his diary. Interesting. Oh, shoot. We probably should read this, shouldn't we? Okay, we'll probably come back to read this in a moment. William Tudor to John Adams. Also looks like a long and interesting letter. But we're not gonna linger there. John Priestley to Benjamin Franklin. Just a quick one. Just giving compliments. Okay. John Jay to Governor Morris. Okay. Not sure there's much for us there. And then Sarah Yard's bill for board. This is I always like looking at the bills. So they're kind of interesting little snapshots of life, right? So, Sarah Yard's bill for board from the diary of John Adams. Yeah, so this is the bill. To your board and lodging for the 10th of May to this day, 11 and a half weeks, 30 shillings per week, I believe. Whoa. 17.5. Your servants, board. To your proportion of the liquor, 13.10. Wow, so you bought a lot of liquor. Drinks quite a bit. Okay, and then here are the totals. Interesting footnotes here, but we're not going to linger too much longer on that. Promissory note to Peter Reeve from the members of the Pennsylvania Committee of Safety, 1st of August, 1775, resume. Okay, this is a promissory note to Peter Reeve. The document throws light on the impromptu methods of financing the war. The Pennsylvania Assembly, in creating the Committee of Safety, had authorized the emission of £35,000 in paper currency or I guess that would be dollars, right? For the defense of the province, but the funds were not immediately available to the committee. You know, I say pounds because there's a pound symbol. If you look on the screen here, it's using the pound symbol, but it would have been dollars, right? So, okay. In mid-July, a subcommittee, including Thomas Wharton Jr., and Robert Morris was directed to borrow, if possible, from the provincial treasurer until the money for the board is emitted. Okay, on July 31st, another subcommittee, Wardens of the Port of subcommittee, also including Wharton and Morris, was directed to borrow as much as it could from the Wardens of the Port of Philadelphia. This promissory note was the result. It makes no mention of the committee, and the signers appear to be contracting the obligations as individuals. Wharton and Morris discharged it after the committee, on August 10th, had made £25,000 available to them to cover such commitments. Okay. Wow, they're just borrowing money from everyone, even the people down at the docks in Philly, to fund the war. Yeah. Okay. You can read this if you like, but that's what this is about. York County Committee to the Pennsylvania Delegates in Congress. All right. Let's read this, and then we'll finish with the John Adams letter. Okay. Okay. Gentlemen, Yorktown, August 1st, 1775. Gentlemen, our county committee met 28th ultimate, and after going through the other business they were called for, which will be the subject of another letter herewith sent, they proceeded to consider in what manner the recommendation of the Assembly and the Continental Congress touching those people in this country who conscientiously scruple bearing arms should be carried into execution. It was expected that some offer would have been made by those people, but as no such offer was made on their part, it was recommended that they should be applied to in every township in this country to see if they would voluntarily propose any mode of contribution agreeable to the recommendations aforesaid. But since the breaking up of the county committee, it has been suggested to the Committee of Correspondence and Observation by some worthy people of that persuasion that all such applications would be fruitless, as those people equally scruple subscribing as bearing arms, but apprehend that if the commissioners and assessors would lay a reasonable sum as a tax on those who refuse and cannot consistent with their conscience bear arms, that it would be submitted to without reluctance, and consequently request the committee to recommend that step to the commissioners and assessors. In so delicate an affair, where on the one hand any harsh measures might tend to infringe the rights of conscience and be construed to be taking money out of our brethren's pockets without their consent, and on the other, the impropriety of one part of the committee defending the whole in a struggle where everything dear to free men is at stake, added to this the danger of the militia laying down their arms, finding the burthen so unequally borne. That's an interesting phrase. Finding the burthen so unequally borne, and that others won't so much as touch it with their little finger. Others, they say, who have as much at stake, and are in many instances abler than themselves to assist in the public conflict. Gosh, what a sentence that was. Let me try to understand and to be conjured. Okay, the committee thought it of too much importance with an E, importance, for them to proceed without the direction of the Congress, or at least of the delegates of this province, more especially as the same difficulty must occur in every county of the province, and we doubt not, but the subject has been thought of by those so much more capable than the committee of framing an expedient to avoid the evils on the one hand and the other. That suggested to you would be agreeable here. Oh, that suggested to us would be agreeable here, and the committee wish that the same or other or some other might be speedily recommended to quiet the minds of people here and prevent inevitable confusion. We are, gentlemen, your most obedient humble servants. James Smith, Chairman. Directed, and it's signed by order of the committee, directed to the delegates of the province of Pennsylvania in Congress, Philadelphia, favored per Mr. Abraham Usher, I believe. Now, basically, this is, I believe, a letter just saying, hey, look, out in York, Pennsylvania, certain people don't want to bear arms against anyone. They're Quakers, right? And they don't believe in bearing arms. So what do we do? The town is split, and some of them may be open to paying a tax, but they wouldn't want to bear arms. So, what is expected of us? That's sort of what I'm gathering from this letter. And this is sent to the delegates from Pennsylvania in the Continental Congress, who were, most importantly, John Dickinson, he wasn't a Quaker, I don't believe, but he had Quaker sentiments, right? He didn't want to fight. He was a wealthy merchant, and he didn't want to go to battle with Britain because he wanted to protect his wealth that was dependent on the British Empire. But and other reasons. There was a strong moral component to him not wanting to bear arms. And then he had Ben Franklin, who was, a clever politician, but certainly didn't mind going to war and, in fact, welcomed it, as you can see from previous letters that I've read already. He was very mad about Boston being attacked by Britain. And he felt that was a cause for war, but he didn't. He allowed John Dickinson to speak his mind, and you can hear John Dickinson probably read that letter from the committee, the provincial committee at York, and was like, yeah, we can't fight Britain. People in New York don't want to fight. Pennsylvanians, a lot of them Quakers, a lot of them loyalists or undecided. They didn't want to fight at this point. Pennsylvania was very split on this, so on whether to fight against Britain. So it was a bit of a toss-up for at least this point in the story. Okay, let's finish off with. I think I covered most of the rest, so let's finish off with this nice long letter from the Diary of John Adams, August 1775. Can I get it to? There we go. Okay. August 1775. I have always imputed the loss of Charleston, which is up in Boston, right? So here, let me just click into the map of Boston real quick. So I have this map of the siege of Boston, and you can see Boston is here. It was a little isthmus coming off of the mainland, this peninsula, and Boston was built on it. Now across from Boston, across the harbor, there was another isthmus or peninsula, where the Mystic River is, and now this is all just land. Like if you look at the current map of Boston, it's all been filled in, but at the time it was a promontory, and where Bunker Hill is and Breed's Hill, and there was a town there called Charlestown or Charleston. So the British bombed it, and set it on fire, and it got demolished. Charlestown was pretty badly destroyed in the Battle of Bunker Hill as well. They set fire to it. So this is what John Adams is beginning with in his diary. I have always imputed the loss of Charleston and of the brave officers and men who fell there, and the loss of an hero, of more worth than all the town, I mean General Warren, to Mr. Dickinson's petition to the king, and the loss of Quebec and Montgomery, to his subsequent unceasing though finally unavailing efforts against independence. He's talking about Dickinson, who I just mentioned, was not interested in fighting the British. Dickinson wanted to preserve his wealth. He was also, if not a Quaker himself, then very much representing the Quakers in his moral feelings about bearing arms in general. And he wanted to seek peace. And he was the main thrust behind the Olive Branch petition, which was sent last month in July 1775. And John Adams didn't like any of that. John Adams and the rest of the delegates from Massachusetts, they were under attack. They had just fought, and some of their brethren died on Bunker Hill. And they didn't like Pennsylvanians saying we shouldn't fight back. These were pugnacious Massachusetts men who wanted to fight. And maybe John Adams was less pugnacious than Sam Adams, but certainly the rest of them, they didn't take kindly to Dickinson at all. So there was a bit of a tiff between Dickinson from Pennsylvania and John Adams in particular. They didn't like each other at this point. They didn't see eye to eye. They had gentlemanly respect for each other, but they didn't agree at all in the approach. So let me restart. I'll just restart. I have always imputed the loss of Charlestown and of the brave officers and men who fell there, and the loss of a hero of more worth than all the town, I mean General Warren, to Mr. Dickinson's petition to the king, and the loss of Quebec and Montgomery to his subsequent unceasing though finally unavailing efforts against independence. These impeded and paralyzed all our enterprises. Had our army been acknowledged in season, with acknowledgment ought to have been our first step, and which acknowledgment ought to have been our first step, and the measures taken to comfort and encourage it, which ought to have been taken by Congress, we should not have lost Charleston. And if every measure for the service in Canada, meaning Canada, from the first projection of it to the final loss of the province, had not been opposed and obstinately disputed by the same party, so that we could finally carry no measure but by a bare majority. And every measure was delayed till it became ineffectual. In the fall of the year, Congress were much fatigued. But with the incessant labors, debates, intrigues, and heats of the summer, and agreed on a short adjournment. The delegates from Massachusetts returned home, and as the two houses of the legislature had chosen us all into the council, we went to Watertown and took our seats, for such times as we could spare before our return to Congress. I had been chosen before 2 years successively, that is, in 1773 and 1774, and being negative by the governor, the first time by Hutchinson and the second by Gage. My friend, Dr. Cooper, attempted to console me under the first negative, which he called a check. I don't know what negative means here. But I told him I considered it not as a check, but as a boost, a word of John Bunyan, which the doctor understood. Okay. If you understand what he's talking about, leave a comment, please. These negatives were indeed no mortification to me, for knowing that neither honor nor profit were to be obtained, nor good to be done in that body in these times, I had not a wish to sit there. Nor good to be done in that body in these times, I had not a wish to sit there. When a person came running to my office to tell me of the first of them, I cried out laughing, "Now I believe in my soul I am a clever fellow, since I have the attestation of the three branches of the legislature, This vulgar, familiar little sally was caught as if it had been a prize and immediately scattered all over the province. I don't really understand what he's talking about. Mr. Hancock came home, but would not call upon General Washington. Dr. Cooper told me he was so offended that Washington was appointed instead of himself, that his friends had the utmost difficulty to appease him. I went to headquarters and had much conversation with General Washington, Ward, Lee, Putnam, Gates, Mifflin, and others, and went with General Lee to visit the outposts and the sentinels nearest the enemy at Charleston. Here Lee found his dogs inconvenient, for they were so attached to him that they insisted on keeping close about him, and he expected he should be known by them to the British officers in the fort, and he expected every moment a discharge of balls, grape, or Lagrange. Or is that how you say it? Longridge? Lagrange? Longridge? By our ears, about our ears. After visiting my friends and the general court, the army, and the country, I returned to Philadelphia, but not till I had followed my youngest brother to the grave. Not till I had followed my youngest brother to the grave. He's not dead. What does he mean? He had commanded a company of militia all summer at Cambridge, and there taken a fatal dysentery, then epidemic in the camp, of which he died, leaving a young widow and 3 young children, who are all still living. Oh, my brother died greatly lamented by all who knew him, and by none more than by me, who knew the excellence of his heart and the purity of his principles and conduct. He died, as Mr. Taft, his minister, informed me, exulting as his father had done in the exalted hopes of a Christian. Very sad. An event of the most trifling nature in appearance, and fit only to excite laughter in other times, struck me into a profound reverie, if not a fit of melancholy. I met a man who had sometimes been my client, and sometimes I had been against him. He, though a common horse jockey, was sometimes in the right, and I had commonly been successful in his favor in our courts of law. I assume he means sometimes he, defended this man in court, and sometimes he prosecuted this man in court. As soon as he saw me, he came up to me, and his first salutation to me was, quote, "Oh, Mr. Adams, what great things have you and your colleagues done for us. We can never be grateful enough to you. There are no courts of justice now in this province, and I hope there never will be another," end quote. Is this the object for which I have been contending? And I to myself, for I rode along without any answer to this wretch. Is this the object for which I have been contending? Said I to myself, for I rode along without any answer to this wretch. Are these the sentiments of such people? And how many of them are there in the country? Half the nation, for which I know, for half the nation are debtors, if not more, and these have been in all countries the sentiments of debtors. If the power of the country should get into such hands, and there is great danger that it will, to what purpose have we sacrificed our time, health, and everything else? Surely we must guard against the spirit and the principles, or we shall repent of all our conduct. However, the good sense and integrity of the majority of the great body of the people came into my thoughts for my relief, and the last resource was, after all, in a good providence. How much reason there was for these melancholy reflections, and subsequent times have too fully shown. The subsequent times have too fully shown. Opportunities enough had been presented to me to convince me that a very great portion of the people of America were debtors. But that enormous gulf of debt to Great Britain, from Virginia and some other states, which have since swallowed up the harmony of all our counsels and produced the triumph of principles too nearly resembling those of my client, was not known to me at that time in a tenth part of its extent. When the consequences will terminate, no man can say. All right, so we'll leave it there with a couple of footnotes. Yeah, a little note on the problem of debt and how much debt was in, how, how basically debtors are the ones that want to stay out of court, so in revolutionary times, people who are in debt, they don't want a government. They want the government to fall. They want all the debts to be forgiven, right? Or not prosecutable in court. So, little note about that. All right, we'll leave it there. If you enjoyed this reading of these letters, please give me a like and a subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.